Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and we're back with a bit of a different type of video. This isn't laddering, this isn't tournament gameplay analysis, although one could argue that it encompasses all of those things and so much more. I'm breaking down what, in my opinion, are the best players in all of Smogon history. For my viewers that don't follow Smogon, just keep in mind that this is very specific to Smogon and Smogon tournaments. This doesn't encompass people who maybe play on Pokemon Showdown only, people who play in different communities, and I'm sure there are plenty of great players out there, but this is very specific to the Smogon community and the Smogon tournament community. So what I've done is I've made some tiers, um, three tiers to make the top 10, and then also some honorable mentions that we'll get to. And I'm also going to post this in the Ruins Valve thread that's up on Smogon discussing the topic. But for now, we're going to go through some notes on my phone that we're going to use to discuss why these players are as good as they are, what makes them qualified, and why they are, in my opinion. But some controversial topics to discuss beforehand. For me, personally, I find that there's a balance between team tournament success and individual tournament success that we have to weigh. Personally, I favor individual tournaments just slightly, but it's close to a 50-50. And when we get into tier two between John and CL, we're actually going to go into a bit more of a breakdown of that. But that aside, both come into important. As for other things, a lot of people also debate the length of the peak that someone might have versus how strong that peak was. So, for example, someone like BKC has been around now for many years and doing well, seeing this top player for probably 6 or 7 years now, if not more. Yeah, probably 6 or 7, I'd say, which is around when I really started seriously following tournaments. So that's great. Whereas someone you might see in tier three, like Sung, only really had a 2.5 year peak, and he was great during those 2 years, winning multiple individual tournaments. However, um, I just find it hard to rank him in the same echelon as someone like BKC. Just comparing those two can completely differently apply to other people in this list as well. And I just feel as if it's hard to rank someone great who might have only been good during one generation, or might have only been good during part of one generation, part of another generation. When there have been people that have been doing this for generation after generation after generation, like putting up consistent numbers and winning various tournaments. And I think that versatility and the time span in which you have peak over very important things. So I do prioritize length over peak, if you will. Both do come into play though. But that's just my personal opinion. Some people like Shake, for example, at PDC might rank Sung closer to number one or even in the top three at least. Personally, my tier one, however, consists of four people, and this is a very clear cut top tier for me. There's none of these guys deserve to be tier two. They're all clear cut tier one, and everyone else is a step below them. In fact, I'd argue that the difference between tier one and tier two is bigger than the difference between any other tiers next to each other in this entire list. So these top four, these are the best of the best, some of the best, most influential, strong players of all time with ridiculously long lists of accolades. And for the record, this is not in any particular order. Um, Personally, the more and more I think about it, APR actually probably is my number one or number two overall, but he's listed first, so we're going to go into him first. However, the other three that are in my tier one would be BKC, McMegan, and Ojama. And all three of these guys, you can make a case for being the number one, number two, number three, number four overall. They're all phenomenal players with long, long, long lists of achievements. So as for ABR, ever since he really came onto the Smogon scene, Middle Generation 6, he's been like no one else. He has shaped those metagames more than anyone else. And that is just a cliff note when it comes to ABR. Because here we're looking more at how much they've won, what they've done in tournaments. And the fact of the matter is that while he's shaping these metagames, he's also doing it with unmatched levels of success. For example, he has two of the top four scores in Smogon tournament individual season history. He has a season with 64 points, and then this past season, I believe he had 59 or 58 points, and those go for third and fourth all time. Empo, someone who we're going to discuss later, and Blue, someone who we're also going to discuss later, both topped him with their own individual seasons, but neither of them have two seasons that are within the top four or five. So ABR's success there and consistency there is unmatched. Um, Speak of consistency, ABR on the sheet, something that we'll refer to, but I'm not going to show a million times just because it's not set up well for me. Um, he's plus 33. That's his plus minus, which is the second best of all time behind Brofist, who we see in tier two. He's 58 and 25. So that's not even a humongous sample size compared to other people on this. So that record is absurd. He very rarely has off tours, and when he has an off tour, he's still finishing even. Whereas if he has an on tour, he's going 8 and 2, 9 and 1, 10 and 3 type of scores. he's always going to be in your tiebreak lineup. He's always going to be a player to watch. You always want to tune into his games in Smaug Tours because he's bringing fresh teams that really help progress the metagames. More importantly, he's winning with these things, and that no one else can say in the modern day. In past generations, people can say that. You could argue that McMegan in particular is something you could say that a lot for in past generations, actually, specifically in five, maybe even in early six. And he still is that way to this day, even in past generations, which is really cool. But ABR in Gen 6, 7, and probably now 8, but we haven't seen as much from in 8, admittedly, because it's still pretty new into the generation. He is like no other. Um, he also won both SPL and World Cup, two big team tournaments. I don't believe he's won Snake yet. He's made playoffs, but never won that. So that might be one of the next things he's looking into. But in terms of individual success, he's two individuals. He won the most recent edition of Smogon Tour, and on top of that, he also won OST a couple years back. He did get really lucky in that OST run, but I mean, he's made it far in OST probably a couple times if I had to guess. I don't know that for sure, but it was a deserved win nevertheless. He's just clearly one of the best players in the new generation, the current generation, at any point in time. Um, API is regarded as a lucky player, and yeah, he probably does get a bit luckier than unlucky. But I mean, it does even out over time. You can't really use that as a huge argument piece when it comes to stuff like this, in my opinion. I'm just trying to look at the numbers and the sheer results, and by those metrics, ABR is within this tier one clearly. Um, it's also worth noting that he made a deep run into Smogon Classy before losing to Solwyn, someone we'll discuss later. Last year, and Solwyn proceeded to make the finals and lose in the finals to McMegan, who we're going to discuss in a moment. But on top of that, he also made it to OLT finals and lost to Alexander, someone who we'll also discuss later. So yeah, I mean, he's making it very far. He's only losing to top-notch players. He has some outlier losses, like for example, he lost early in Smogon Tour to Santu once, or he's lost to one True Lakin in World Cup, who's not in this conversation, but still a good player. But the point is that when ABR loses to these people, it's like a huge deal because ABR is so good. He's such a generational talent that you kind of are shocked, you're taken aback, and that's why ABR does belong here. He is undoubtedly in tier one, and in arguably a shorter time than any of these people, he's risen to these ranks. And I'm curious to see if his trajectory allows him to be in his own tier one, where these guys eventually drop to tier two and the below drop to tier three, and so on and so forth. So that's something to look forward to in the future. Anyway, let's transition to BKC, another one of my teammates on Northeast. And BKC is a phenomenal player. You could argue that he's seen better days because he's been a little tilted as of late. Really unlucky running Classic, and he had a great SPL run, but his 2019 just didn't pan out as he'd have liked. A rough World Cup for his standards, and I don't believe he did too well in Snake either. I think he did poorly. One could argue that his abilities in SMOU aren't great, but in generations 1 through 6, well, 2 through 6, I don't know about his RBY capabilities, but I'm sure he's competent. He seems to know what he's talking about, and things like ROAPL. But I'm not one to first hand comment on RBY stuff much, just full disclosure. 2 through 6, he's very passionate about all those generations. He knows what he's doing. He's kind of shaped generations 3, 4, and 5, arguably as much as anyone else collectively. Um, he won Smogon tournament twice, and there was 3 years in between that. So, I mean, generations changed. All the metagames involved changed specifically. So it just shows he's got a very long peak, which is something that I personally respect a lot. And he's arguably like the protagonist of World Cup on Smogon. I mean, that's just from my perspective. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but protagonist, antagonist labels aside, he has been up there. He and Brofist have been up there, World Cup winning time after time after time again with this. I don't want to say dynasty, but this recurring theme of success on East into Northeast, specifically in East. And while he's lost in tiebreak in recent years, he's also had a lot of kind of heroic moments in tiebreaks of something like SPL or tiebreaks of World Cup many more times. And obviously, he's capable of handling high leverage situations. Moreover, he's plus 21 on this sheet with a 68-47 record, which is fourth most wins of all time. Remember, plus 21 is not quite as good as someone like ABR or even John. It's still quite good. It puts him in ridiculously good territory, surrounded by some of the other players on this list. So, yeah, just given the depth of his knowledge, the impact he has on those around him, I mean, aside from the fact he's a phenomenal player and he's always going to go, he's more likely than not going to go positive. He's had a couple down tours, yeah, as we said, but he also just helps the teammates around him so much, and he's going to consistently be worth north of 30K in SPL like settings, and going to be one of the best players in tournaments like World Cup. So yeah, BKC definitely belongs here, and I'm personally a little lower on him than ABR right now. I think BKC for me is number 3 or 4, and he's 4 for sure. But he's phenomenal, and the sheer dedication that he displays on a very consistent basis from year to year to year is just unmatched. And BKC is very unique in that regard. And while he uses fairly standard teams, he still finds ways to push the standards to new realms that other people don't really have the ability to do. Speaking of things that other people can't do, McMegan, let's segue to him. He is a very creative player. He's arguably the best creative slash gimmicky player of all time. He's just like Ben Gay on some really ridiculous steroids, if you will. A lot of his team choices are unconventional and they pay off more so than anyone else. Yeah, there have been times, even entire tournaments or stretches of time, where he just uses meme things for the sake of being fun and he doesn't find success. And you could argue that his low lows are what stands out in this tier one and why he's not maybe number one or two, but more like number two or three in my eyes. Um, but again, you could argue any of these four in any order, and I would completely understand. McMegan has had low lows though. For example, SPL 7, he I believe went like 2-6 or something along those lines, maybe 3-6 or 2-7, but that was an ADV. He just wasn't feeling it. It didn't really gel for him. And those are times when his motivation does take hits. But recently he's been back on top of things. He not only won Smogon Classic last year against a very strong field of opponents, but on top of that, he also did well in Smogon Tour, making finals before falling to ABR himself. So again, much like ABR, McMegan has been facing top competition, and yeah, sometimes he loses, but he's only losing to really strong opponents. Just showing the sheer level of skill there. His ceiling is arguably the highest of any player all time because of that, in my eyes. McMegan's ceiling is really impressive. He's dominated tournaments, and even when you feel like he's maybe a bit past his prime, he shows that time and time again he is not. He's able to qualify for tournaments. And for example, he's in Smaug on tour right now, despite being Gen 6, 7, and 8, which you could argue are three of his four worst generations. I don't think McMegan's some RBY whiz, so maybe his Generation 6 or 7 is better than his RBY, or maybe those are his three worst generations. I don't know yet, but that aside, McMegan is taken up GSC within the last 3 or 4 years, kind of a bit of a renaissance there, and done fairly well. Not super dominant, but fairly well. And his generations 3 and 5 are phenomenal. Generations 4, he's definitely able to hold his own as well. Um, so yeah, his classic and Smogon tournament victories, he's won both of those tournaments, are thoroughly impressive. I don't think he's had much success in OLT. Maybe he's qualified once. Don't quote me on that though. I'm not quite sure. I knew he was in the mix last year and it just didn't pan out though. But he also is an SPL champion if you go back a while. And his record in the sheet actually isn't very impressive due to those kind of low tournaments. While he's had a lot of dominant performances, he's also had some poor performances, such as the SPL 7 we mentioned. He's only 59 and 50 with a plus 9 overall, which does land him in the top 10 in wins, which is impressive. But the plus 9 differential, I mean, there are players who are like pretty good, like sure myself, for example, that I have a little better plus minus. And that's not saying that I'm on the same tier as any of these guys. No, no, no. They are much better, much more accomplished over a longer period of time. But it is saying that McMegan's overall team tournament success simply isn't the same as individual success. His individual success is what puts him in this tier. Um, and that has been a very long, successful stretch. So he belongs here, but the team tournament success just isn't really what's kind of making McMegan here, if you will. On the contrary, though, Ojama, he's plus 20 in team tournaments, and he is someone also that I would probably put in the 2-3 category as well. If I really had to do it, I think it'd be ABR 1, McMegan 2, Ojama 3. Those two like neck and neck for me in BKC 4. But again, you could really argue anyway. But Ojama team tournaments has done really well. He's top 3 in wins in the sheet with a plus 20 differential, and I believe 76 overall wins, which is crazy. 76 wins in team tournaments over however many years, regardless of that. It's just so many wins, and that's crazy good. He's been around for a long period of time, and he didn't really have any like super like long droughts over that period of time. Yeah, he's had like a bad SPL or a bad World Cup here and there, or maybe he's even went even in something like Snake. But no matter what, the next tournament you're seeing him popping off. You're seeing him do really well in an individual at the same time or like right after. He's never had like this prolonged drought, although he has been recently tournament banned. But I'm not going to hold that against him because he didn't really cheat in the game itself so much as he tried to get onto a different team, like manipulate. I don't know how to explain it, but this isn't a video for that. In terms of sheer gameplay, Ojama is undisputably within tier one. He's won both Classic, I believe the first Smogon Classic, in fact, which is even more impressive, is all of the big guns back then were gunning to try and win that that first Smogon Classic, and he was able to emerge victorious. He beat people like McMegan, Heist in that, which is really impressive. And this was a number of years ago, but even within recent memory, he did lose to Lavos in the Classic finals in which Lavos cheated. Well, he didn't cheat his own games. He ghosted someone else, but he lost that trophy. So in my eyes, Ojama is quote unquote the winner of that. Like he doesn't have the trophy, but like I kind of give him a little mental credit there, just because I take a very anti-cheating stance. Again, that's something specific to my opinion. You guys can feel it totally differently, but it's chill either way. Um, in addition to that, he also made OLT finals against a guy who was very sketchy, and I think eventually got caught as well. So yeah, I mean, Uchama's had so much success spread out over so many different formats, showing that he can even achieve high results in SMOU. Whereas wasn't really his generation, but he's always sort of held his own in Smaug Tour there. But also his black white is very not only individual specific in terms of his teams he pilots, things that other people maybe can't make work as well, but also very dominant at times there. He kind of has his own way of making things work, his own unique and defined style, and that shows in ADV, DVP, with a lot of interesting EV spreads that people have alluded to over the years, and of course black and white, and even SM as well. So yeah, Ojama, clearly within this tier for me, he's a great player, and while we butted heads before, I have the utmost respect for him as a player, and I'm hoping that he comes back after his ban expires and plays in future tournaments because he definitely can stay within this. But if he fades and people like John rise or someone maybe in tier three that's a bit newer rises, I mean, who knows? I guess we don't really have any newer players there, so I take that back. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see what Ojama's future trajectory has to bring because clearly these guys are still playing and doing well. So yeah, he's in no way crossed in my eyes. Ojama can and will come back and win. Anyway, let's get into tier two here. So tier two is only two people, and they're two people that are vastly different. I consider Brofist to be the best team tournament player of all time. Not only because his record is great at 63 and 29, which is very ABR-esque. In fact, it has him ABR beat with a plus 34 differential, but there are a lot more, a handful more games, so probably like a dozen more games played. So I don't want to say he's like got a better record, but what really stands out for me is the amount of high leverage situations which John is able to go into with a straight face and dominate, completely dominate. Last World Cup was unfortunately a bit of an outlier performance for him, as he was not able to dominate against a strong U.S. West opponent in lax. He fell short twice in the playoff settings when he was needed. But that aside, he's just done phenomenal. For example, World Cup 2018, he was able to win out in playoffs, I believe. I think he only had one loss to Laurel, which he got unfortunate, and that was in round one. He won in tiebreak multiple times. I think he had like 7 or 8 games won in a row at some point towards the end. And yeah, I mean, John just always stands out as one of the best players in your tournament fields. And I mean, he hasn't taken really a step back recently either. I haven't seen any regression there. And while he's been a bit quiet in Generation 8, he still did pretty well in SPL. He's just a great player all around. The thing is that he really lacks individual results, and that's kind of why he's not in tier one, as he's clearly as good a player in my eyes, but you can't say he's as proven as those guys. If only because he's only really made a couple playoffs. I believe he made Smogon Tour and Classic like 2 or 3 years ago, and that was great because he tried in both. But he doesn't really try in individual tournaments as much, and that's kind of why he's just a step behind those guys. But I mean, the amount of tiebreak success he's had, the amount of team tournament success he's had, specifically probably making him the best World Cup player of all time, which is a ridiculous achievement, seeing as World Cup is Smagon is the longest running tournament besides OST probably. Maybe Smog Tour as well. Don't quote me on that. I don't know, but all three of those tours have been running for ages now. Um, Longest running team tournament, that is for sure. John is simply put one of the best team tournament players of all time, if not the best team tournament player of all time, and that's why he belongs in tier two. CL on the other hand is very mediocre in team tournaments, only being plus three in the sheet with a 28 and 25, which respectable. Don't get me wrong, but that doesn't put him within the top 50 team tournament players in my eyes. However, much on the contrary to Brofest, he is an individual tournament beast. He has three unique individual trophies, meaning he's won OLT, Smogon Classic, and Smogon Tour. In addition to that, I believe he made it very far in Grand Slam twice, if not then once. I think the first one, but don't quote me on that. And he wins with really unique stuff too. I mean, you could draw flashbacks to that Pikachu game against Sabella and OLT, sure, but also he's used very clever teams in Black White, for example. He used that Porygon 2 team um, deep into Smogon Tour and Black White, which was always cool to see. Yeah, CL just has a really interesting knack, and I don't think it translates as well to team tournaments when people are a bit more specifically prepared for him, maybe. But I think it really does well in qualifying for individuals and also in playoffs of individual tournaments when people are maybe a bit too scared to tunnel in on specific counter styles or tactics because they're playing for their own life and death situation in that tournament. Overall, CL's unique style really kind of resonates with me in a way because while I'm not like that personally, I really think that it takes a certain level of skill to risk things the way he does, not only in the game but also in the builder. And I think this has really been why he's been so successful in these interviews and really been able to stand out and flourish on his own. And I think team tournaments just aren't as fit to his play style, unfortunately. But yeah, he and Brofist are definitely tier two, definitely 5 and 6 in some order. It really just depends if you prioritize individuals or team tournaments. But regardless, they're kind of very different. But yet, once you consider like their differences cancel each other out because one is team tournaments, one is individuals, they're kind of the same in that way. And that's why I put them together in tier two. That's just kind of the most logical conclusion to me. Others feel very differently. Some rank John a lot higher, some rank CL a lot higher. It really depends what you prioritize. For me, it's kind of an even split as I alluded to before, and as I'm alluding to again here. So yeah, but both are superb players, and both definitely deserve to be in tier two. As for someone that one could argue was snubbed from tier two, that would be Earthworm. Earthworm is the first person I'm going to talk about in tier three. Admittedly, I have some recency bias against him. Earthworm, if you look at his resume, probably belongs in that tier two. Not only has he won Smogon Tour and World Cup, but he also has an SPL winner at his belt. I grouped the two first ones before because his Smog Tour win was like Smogon Tour 6, I believe, and that was a while back. So I don't have a grasp of how competitive it was back then, admittedly, but it is still Smogon Tour. But also the World Cup team, he won that multiple times in the Oceania team, and that team was ridiculous. And you know what? The part of why it was ridiculous because of someone like him and Earthworm's merciless dominance for a number of years. And honestly, there was a point in time when he was probably the undisputed GOAT, but years have passed since then, unfortunately. But he also has an SPL win, and that shows that he can kind of be that star if need be. And yeah, this was years ago, but still, Earthworm is definitely um, within the conversation of someone who's like a GOAT during the start of Generation 5 or later in Generation 4, one could argue. And his success is not only in DPP, in fact, it's very much not. It's mostly in GSC, where he's seen as one of the better GSC players of all time. He's still at an SPL level, probably a lower SPL level, but he's still great. Just not really as strong and as consistent as he once was. He probably tries a bit more fringe ideas, if you will. I just feel like his ability to kind of recognize patterns and deduce plays from there has dropped from now. Even when his second peak, basically when he came back from a bit of a hiatus, was great, and then it kind of deteriorated over the last year or two. But his first peak also probably predates me a bit, but I've heard so many great things. And I mean, just as a testament to that, he's plus 20 in the seat with 63 wins, which puts him top six overall. That coupled with the aforementioned individual success, winning a Smog on tour, and I'm sure he did well in others. I know in his first classic he played, he made it far in both GSC and RBY, and those were only two he even joined. He almost was like in the playoff picture at one point, just off those two, which is crazy. But yeah, he's falling off now, which is unfortunate, and why I put him in tier three. But honestly, you could group him in tier two. I'd say he's probably the highest of these guys in tier three. Um, Now, speaking of other sort of outliers, a lot of people kind of struggle to rank Solwyn. Some put him really high, some put him really low. I kind of think I have him a bit in the middle here. Solwyn doesn't have an individual trophy, and that's kind of what haunts him. And I hate to say it too because he's been in finals countless times, and he's clearly deserving of an individual tournament. If he won Smaug on Tour or Classic, no one would blink an eye. It'd be like, oh, Solon won, good for him, he deserves it. And I'm not his biggest like fan because I don't think he's that great in ORAS, SM, or SS. I think those tiers, his abilities are nowhere near where they are in Black White. But he is the best Black White player of all time, and I don't think anyone can dispute this at this point. His list of accolades in that tier alone are just absurd. But the fact that he's able to put up consistent enough results to qualify easily in Classic and in Smaug on Tour just shows that his knack for the game is great, and Solon is clearly deserving of being in this tier in my eyes. Couple that with the fact that he's probably top 3 to 5 team tournament player of all time, putting up a massive 84 wins. I think that puts him second all time behind Tamahome. Someone we'll get to right after him. And even if he hasn't won a team tournament, he still has made it very far, countless times, making it to like 4 or 5 finals, qualifying for over a dozen playoffs, etc. So yeah, there's a lot to go off of. However, I think until he wins a team tournament, I don't think we could move him an individual tournament. Sorry, I don't think we could move him up to tier two just because he doesn't really have the champion thing going for him, I guess. And I hate that it holds him back. Someone's clearly a player that is just as good as the other guys mentioned above in their peaks, but you kind of have to have something to quantify that, and it's just not there yet. And that's kind of where I have this like little moral dilemma, philosophical dilemma rather, in my eyes, and that's why I put him squarely in the middle of tier three. But there's definitely more room for him to move up than probably someone like Earthworm, who's on his way down, or Sung, who's kind of gone completely now. So yeah, Another person squarely in the middle of tier 3 that we just mentioned before, Tomahawk, is the most winning team tournament player of all time, putting up not 85, right above Solon, but 94 wins in team tournaments, a whopping 94 and 64. Also putting up plus 30, which is, I think, third or fourth in differential behind John and ABR, who we talked about before. And he's not only done this just in DPP or ADV, his two best years, DDP specifically, is probably the best, if not the top three DP player of all time, alongside someone like Philip for numbers, who we'll discuss a bit later. Um, he's also shown success in SM, even in black white. He could play GSC and RBY even as well. So he's a very good player across the generations. Versatility unmatched. His team building isn't really there relative to people like ABR or BKC, Ojama, McMegan, or even someone who's building very well in black white. I don't know about other tiers. I don't think he builds as well in other tiers, but at least he's got one dominant tier where he realizes a grasshopper. He's not as much of a builder, although he can build DPP and ADV, from my understanding. But he's just a phenomenal pilot. He's probably one of the best pilots of all time, given where his placement. And he doesn't have any individual trophies, I believe, but he's in the best conversation for DPP players of all time and over the generation players of all time. Hence his placement on this list. And also, he's going to make classic playoffs this year, so who knows, that could change. And overall, Tama never really crusted out. I mean, there have been times when he's been a bit less active or a bit less dominant, but overall, he's always been one of the top players across the generations, and that's why he belongs here. Finally, last but not least, in our quote unquote top 10 and tier 3 would be Tasung. As for Tasung, I personally put him near the end of the top 10. Others put him very high. This is the whole peak versus prolonged consistency debate. His peak was great. It was 2 years of dominance where he won not only a Smogon Tour 18, which had a very stacked field, but also a Smogon Classic, showing that some versatility, some range that people didn't think he had. Kind of similar to the resemblance of Great Astard's rise to prominence, except Great was as a manager in SPL and then as a player on a stacked World Cup team and only won one individual tournament. That OSG kind of has an asterisk next to it, whereas Sissel won two individual tournaments, coupled with, I believe he won a World Cup or two too in there. So yeah, Tasung had a really great peak, and it was kind of short lived though, and also kind of similar to CL on the sheet. He's only 25 and 21, which is only plus four, and he has had a dominant season too. I think he had like an 8-2 run in there, but oh yeah, remember the SPL where he basically gate kept PDC multiple times, meaning by PDC like two of PDC's only losses and just dominating him in the playoffs on the Falcons against the Runers in SPL 6. But I digress. That aside, the depth of his kind of peak is just not there. He fell off or stopped playing, became inactive, whatever you want to say. And he just never really came back for a long period of time. He's made a flash in Snake and UU a couple years ago, where I think he went roughly even on a not so clean team. But overall, Sung had an amazing peak, won two individuals, and is positive on the sheet. So he belongs in this conversation for sure, but I can't rank him any higher, just given that I do prefer longevity and consistency, and it simply isn't there. He's only been really good for 2 or 3 years, and that time is also well beyond us. And I do have a bit of recency bias, full disclosure. Maybe you see it reflected in these rankings, maybe you don't. But yeah, I just think that Sung is probably like 9 or 10 in my eyes, and that's completely fine. It still puts him in amazing company. Now we'll just briefly touch on some honorable mentions. No real pictures, nothing big here. So honorable mentions, tier four consists of Lavos, M Dragon, Tricking, Blue, and Veteran of Love. Tricking might stand out to you guys a bit, but he's been the best team tournament player in Generation 7 OU. And no one can take that away from him. Just look at the records, consistent 6-3 or above kind of records. He won, I believe, he won OLT, and he made it to Grand Slam finals. And he's also made deep runs into Smogon Tour, and he made Smogon Classic playoffs. I mean, just across the board, Tricking finds ways to win with unique teams, unconventional teams. He's arguably the second or third best gimmicky player of all time, and his just sheer outplaying potential is unmatched. I'd argue that he has a top five ceiling on this list, which is crazy considering the players he's surrounded by. Tricking is just phenomenal, and while his ranking on the sheet isn't there yet due to not like playing over a long period of time, it's gonna get there. He's still well into the positives, and he has an individual trophy under his belt, so he belongs there. M Dragon, on the contrary, has played for a very long period of time and had sustained success in kind of a stable fashion over numerous generations, dating back to GSC all the way through ADV, DVP, Black White. Not so much in Oras, but he's still showing flashes. He won a Smaug tour, and he's made it far in others. Made it, I believe, to classic playoffs a couple times. So yeah, he's great, and he's got north of 50 wins. I think he's like 54 and 51 or something like that in the sheet. No. I think he's got a bit more than positive three. Probably like close to +8 or +10. He's actually around where I am, but he's got a couple more wins or a couple less losses, basically. But yeah, you combine those things, individual success and just prolonged team tournament success, and kind of being one of the defining players of numerous old generations, and M Dragon clearly belongs here. Blue, controversial. I downgrade him a ton, her a ton rather, because of the cheating scandal, and who knows what else she cheated in. But she does at least deserve an honorable mention because Blue won a Frontier, had prolonged success in Smaug Tour with the second most points all time, and then another great dominant season, just qualifying time after time after time, despite never winning one. Kind of was cursed with some bad luck, kind of akin to Solwyn, but in a bit smaller of a scale. Winning Frontier is superb. She kind of won OST in a way, but not really. That hurts her more than anything. She also did well in a couple team tournaments and going for like 40K that one year to go 6-3. That was something all right. But yeah, Blue definitely deserves the conversation, but I don't want to give her much more attention just because the whole cheating thing leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So someone that's very clean, veteran in love, um, fell off pretty hard within the recent years, but he's won two of the first three Smogon tournaments, official Smogon tours. Yeah, not official. Sorry. And he's also had a lot of team tournament success. Also some more mediocre performances, kind of a mixed bag, but he's been around and he's kind of been floated in this conversation. I would never put him in my top 10 personally. I think he's closer to 15th, maybe even 20th. No, 15th. Sorry. Yeah, 15th, I'd say. But just the depth of success over old generations is ridiculous. And while he's definitely fallen off in recent years, he's someone you have to include in these honorable mentions in my eyes. And then polar opposite, Lavos, who's kind of been flashy and really strong over a couple years in GSC, but also just classic tiers in general. Um, a knack for using really flashy offensive teams, but also capable of piloting stalls in tiers like GSC. I can't put him in top 10. If he had his classic trophy, I would. He'd probably be around where Tasung is in my eyes because his dominance in GSC over team tournaments was absurd. Something like 24-5 shit over a couple years, which is great. But he got stripped of his classic trophy for ghosting Aladdin against me and probably other people in GSC Cup. And yeah, he played his own games himself, I believe. I'd like to believe anyway, but I'm sorry. I can't promote cheating. I really am morally against it. So for me, Lavos is probably like 11th or 12th because of that. It's just a whole debate that I don't want to get into. And there's a reason why I excluded him from my tier 3 because of that. And I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. So he's going to eventually probably fall into tier 5 when new heroes rise, up and comers such as Empo, who probably is a bit of a stretch to include here, but in tier 5, I think it's fine. Empo has had the most dominant Smaug on Tour season of all time, putting up 78 points this season. And a very top heavy field. A lot of great people like Solon and ABR included within it, and he's clearly a great player. And he also had a dominant run in SPL, basically carrying his team's success. He's actually won back-to-back SPLs, where he's been kind of a playoff hero this year, even winning in tiebreak, I believe. So, yeah, um, he's great, and Empo should not be disrespected. Actually, no, he didn't win a tiebreak, did he? Fuck, I'm sorry, I can't remember, but he won a lot of high leverage situations in the playoffs regardless. And he's another one season tour, and he's had actually a lot of individual success, making it far, and a couple individuals. So he's kind of on the fringe of brilliance, and he's gonna get there. Definitely, he's flirting with tier 4 and even tier 3. If he wins Smog on tour, he might just jump into tier 3 in my eyes. Yeah, Ben Gay won in OST and also made it very far in a Smog on tour before he lost to Pasha. As for individuals, he's also choked a lot though in finals, later stages, which is kind of rough. He is a bit of a choke artist, especially in team tours too. Um, but he has also won a lot of good games. Really high highs, low lows, and just a lack of consistency in a way is what kills me because sometimes he's going to be a world beater, innovating the metagame in front of our eyes, and you're like, ooh, wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And yeah, he kind of has that ABR trajectory, but he also has a really low floor for games and bringing teams that are just a bit too out there. So he has the low floor of McMegan. So he's kind of like a combination of the two, but you don't really get the best of the best always. You also sometimes get the worst of the worst. And tier 5 is kind of fitting for him because he's clearly a phenomenal player and he offers so much uniquely in terms of team building, in terms of style, in terms of potential high ceiling plays, but it's not always there. There are off days that hurt him. So I put him in tier 5. I think you could argue tier 4 though after the OS2 win, that's for sure. Other people that I'd like to just briefly touch on. Bab is kind of like a light version of Solomon. He's got very good numbers on the sheet, I believe, in terms of total wins, and he's made it to plenty of tour playoffs and individual tour playoffs, but he's never actually won one, which kind of holds him back. And why I think he's just a little bit below Solomon tier. Just why I have him in the middle of tier 5. Prince Alexander on Smogon, if you will. I call him Prince. maybe a surprise to some of you guys, but I think he's there. He's been dominant in a couple of generations, specifically RBY and ADV now. But he could also he won an OLT in Oras. I mean, he can play current gens, very versatile, and he helped lead the Runers to SPL this year. And he's gonna make other playoffs. He's made it far in Classic before. I think he's always a dark horse to win that when he's in that field. And yeah, I think he's definitely in this. If he wins another individual, he's gonna go tier 3 for sure. Last but not least, we have Philip Numbers, who is in the conversation with Tom Mahone and a couple others, best TPP player of all time. Got an individual under his belt, I believe. And on top of that, he also has just been very consistent in DPP and team tours, and he also has dabbled in black white decently. So yeah, the versatility isn't enough to really rank him much higher, but he has an individual tournament and sustained team tour success. So definitely in the conversation, and why I put him squarely in the middle team tier 5, and at the bottom of tier 5, I put conflict. You could argue he might be a bit lower, a bit higher. I don't think he's got an individual tour, but he he's got absurd amounts of team tour success. Not only in GSC either, although GSC he's at times was considered the best all time or top 3 all time in GSC. But also he can play ADV, he can play DVP, he can play RBY, he can play Black White. Specifically, Black White probably second best here. He's great. He's even dabbled in new generations, and overall, Conflict's just someone who's been around and good for a very long time. He's got a very defined, unique style that kind of separates him from others as well, and why he stands out as someone that's clearly at least borderline top 20, if not definitely like somewhere between 18 and 20 in my eyes. So yeah, he's gonna be the last honorable mention we get. But yeah, conflict's definitely in this conversation as well. Less tangible results, so we can't rank him much higher. But that'll do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. These are the best Smogon tournament players of all time, in my opinion. Hope you guys enjoyed this different video. More laddering stuff in the near future. This was tired today. Anyway, this is Finch. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out, guys. Have a good night.